All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Tim Washington. I'm the co-founder and CEO of JetCharge. Today, I've been asked to present about our transition to zero emissions mobility, and I've been given 10 minutes to do that, which is almost impossible. But that'll be the theme for today. Almost impossible. So I'm here to tell you that, surprisingly, the transition to zero emissions mobility actually has very little to do with cars and has everything to do with infrastructure. So let's get into it. Because I've only got 10 minutes, you won't be able to read this incredibly important disclaimer, and you're probably not going to get much time to look at our tagline. Let's pause on this. So here's the crux of the matter. We as a country and much of the globe have committed to net zero by 2050. You've been hearing this over and over again, so I don't want to labour it. But practically what that means is that we won't be able to have any internal combustion engine vehicles on the road. The average life of a vehicle in Australia is 15 years. So practically speaking, the last internal combustion engine vehicle, petrol and diesel vehicle, needs to have been sold in 2035. So what does that mean? 100% of new vehicle sales need to be electric by 2035. We're currently at, last year, 4%. We need to go from 4% to 100% in 12 years. When I first did this slide, it was 13 years ago. And just for some context, the global financial crisis was 15 years ago. And it seemed like only yesterday, when I was a young lawyer, discussing how long it would last. And so we've got less time than that to go from 4% to 100% EV sales. But that's actually not the major challenge, because the cars are coming. Almost every vehicle manufacturer, you've heard this many times, almost every vehicle manufacturer has gone electric. A lot of countries are banning electric. Europe's about to pass a law that says no more petrol and diesel vehicles from 2035, right? So we're a late bloomer, in Australia, but we'll get there. The cars will come. But infrastructure, 12 years or even 27 years is a blink of an eye for infrastructure. You know how long it takes to build roads, to build electricity infrastructure. We need to cater for a doubling of electricity demand by 2050. That is no time at all. The other bad news, and the reason why it's almost impossible, is because unlike petrol and diesel vehicles, there aren't a handful of companies that you can point to say, do it faster, do it cheaper, do it better. Almost none. EV infrastructure, if you don't drive an EV, you're probably thinking like that photo there, right? You drive up to a public charging space, you plug into a big machine, similar to what you do with petrol and diesel. But the interesting thing about EV charging infrastructure is that public charging, like that site that's on the slide, only makes up 10% of all electric vehicle charging. 90% is done in private. What does that mean? It means that there are millions of people and companies rolling out charging infrastructure, all at their own cost of capital. So you can't point to millions of companies and people and say, do it better, do it cheaper, do it faster. It is almost impossible. And that challenge is what makes it exciting and daunting and scary all at the same time. So if you sum all of that up, what does it mean? It means that infrastructure rollout for electric vehicle charging so that we can hit net zero by 2050 will be slower than required, and it will cost more than required. And JetCharge, as a business, will try and solve that issue. But before we get to the answer, let me tell you a bit about who we are. We are Australia's only vertically integrated EV charging business, and we are driven by three things: sustainability, industry, and equity. The first one you may think is obvious, but for us, the extra point to note is that we think EVs are going to be the sleeping giant of the renewable world and the sustainability world. People will buy cars because they want cars, not because they like to hug trees. And the sustainability point is particularly poignant because we are now, in Australia, the only EV charging company of scale not backed by fossil fuels. And we're only at 4% EV penetration. and we are now the only company not backed by fossil fuels. That's scary for me. The second point is industry. We take the first step. We are the leaders in this industry, and we've been leading it for 10 years. We want to build a vibrant IP industry in Australia. We want to be able to look back on the transition and go, we have something to show for it. And the last thing is equity, and perhaps the most important. We believe electric vehicles, in combination with things like renewable energy, solar, and bidirectional charging, will be one of the main ways in which we're able to create a better equilibrium and a new normal for people by eliminating their transport and electricity costs in one go. We think it will create a fairer society. So we're driven by those three things. And how do we achieve those three things? We work on four main things. The first thing we do is we deploy the most charging stations in Australia, your bread and butter business. We've deployed over 15,000. We're the largest hardware distributors and the largest installers for electric vehicle charging infrastructure. We're the charging partners for 26 vehicle brands, 80% of the fleet market, and almost every top-tier property developer. We manufacture our own hardware in Australia. It's made in Melbourne. We make our own charging stations. We deploy other brands as well. We're the leaders in energy management for electric vehicle charging, which basically means you've got a building, it can't handle electric vehicle charging because it wasn't made for it. We deploy our energy management tech, and it allows them to absorb 5 times as many charging stations. And lastly, we're the leaders in grid integration by providing visibility to utilities over charging equipment, allowing to control them and move them up and down. And we're the only company, as part of a consortium, to have traded electric vehicles on the NEM, on the FCAS market. So we do all of these things. And the only way we're able to execute all of that is because I have the honour and privilege to be working with 150 of the brightest, most driven team in the electric vehicle industry, bar none. I strongly believe that. Not all of them come to us because they are huge advocates of a renewable world. But we bring a huge diversity of people into our company, and we train them to be part of the renewables industry. Our journey has been a long one. Everything I've told you so far, I knew none of that when I quit my corporate lawyer job and my family business and started this business with my co-founder, Ellen. We started out as electricians for Tesla. We started ChargeFox in 2017, which is now the largest public charging network in Australia, and we sold that to the clubs last year. And we're privileged to have on our cap table some of the best investors in the country. But our journey is nowhere near done. So this is the key slide, I guess, of the answer. Our aim is to make EV charging free by providing access to the largest flexible load on the grid. And we're going to do that through 3 main horizons. The first way we're going to do that, Horizon 1, which is what we do today, is to be the best deployer of charging infrastructure in the country, the most efficient, and have the best vertical integration of anyone in this country. We're well on our way to doing that, and we're scaling up to meet that. Horizon 2 is going to be about taking control and ownership over private charging infrastructure so that we can deploy at scale and at much lower cost compared to someone's credit card. We believe in bringing the lowest cost of capital to the deployment of distributed charging infrastructure, and we will do for charging infrastructure what others have done for smart meters. And the last way we're going to do it is we're going to take advantage of our expertise in bidirectional charging and energy management and offer these charging stations and flexible services to our partners and utilities on the grid. And if we're able to pull off all of these things, if we're able to do all of these things, we'll make the almost impossible a little bit bigger, and we'll make the impossible a little bit smaller. Thanks.
What a convincing story and a convincing journey. So thank you very much for that. So we have time for a couple of questions. So putting it out to the audience. Yes, over there.
heavy trucking.
How is your...
I think we
I
have a
heard your question, yeah. So the question was, how is my business going to support the rollout of heavy trucking? Well, we can't make the trucks, so that's probably can't contribute there. But from the charging perspective, one development that we've made is an all-in-one solar battery plus charging skid that you can transport to site. And so we firmly believe that the future is going to be battery-backed charging solutions rather than purely grid-based. There's a lot of reasons behind that, but the short answer is because the grid operators are not in a position to support the rapid rollout of charging infrastructure. So it'll be a battery solution, and then our energy management will form a key part of that. Yep.
Apparently it's working now. Oh, excellent. One of the things that's held Australia back fairly disgracefully in this space has been the efforts of contrary lobbying to prevent the EV revolution. Will you also be investing in lobbying in the other direction so we can have a national fuel efficiency standard and the kind of investment that is needed in the infrastructure?
Thanks, great question. So I can assure any investors that's in the room today, I haven't actually donated any of Jet Charger's funds to lobbying efforts. But I personally, I'm the chair of the Electric Vehicle Council, which is the main industry body in Australia for electric vehicles, which I helped to found. And we have been working extremely hard with government on the lobbying side. Behad Jafari, who's the CEO, does an amazing job. And we have scored a lot of wins in a very short amount of time. And I guess the fuel efficiency standard is a major thing, and we believe it's going to come. Yep.
We probably have time for one more question.
Thank you. Back to the question around heavy haul transport. Can you talk to, I guess both for that and for sedan vehicles, the charging time and how you think that might impact the transition to 100% EV fleet by 2035? You know, could a truck, for example, spend 3 hours charging at a way station? How do you see that evolving?
Yeah, so I think the key there is to break it down. So charging time for passenger vehicles and light commercial vehicles will not be an issue. We're down to 15 minutes for the really big public charging stations, so I don't see that as an issue. And then once you get into the trucks, you have to break it down. Most trucks aren't travelling from Melbourne to Sydney. Most trucks are actually doing intercity, and they will charge in depots, and that charging will be fine. So we're doing the largest truck project at the moment, 56 trucks, they're all electric. The biggest problem will be interstate and long haulage transport. That'll be the hardest thing to solve. From an electric perspective, I believe in battery electric vehicles and trucks being able to fix that issue, but you're going to need a different approach to public charging to make that work. Trucks ain't going to be able to park there for 3 hours. We're developing 1 to 1.5 megawatt charging at the moment, which means they should be able to get a full charge for their truck in about half an hour, but you're going to need a very different kind of site to make that happen. And of course, you're going to have hydrogen trucks, you're going to have battery swap stations if Janus Electric can get their way. So there'll be a combination of technologies, but the main challenge will be how do you approach trucking public charging infrastructure sites? And I think it's probably going to be a combination of on-site renewables, battery storage and charging, like literally solar farms connected to battery storage and charging. Yep. Okay.
Thank you. Let's give our speaker another round of applause.